Hello, it's Howard Rheingold.
Okay, so let's just jump back to Putnam for a minute. You're talking about northern Italy. You're a pretty poor subsistence farmer, and you've got some neighbors, and you break your leg. How are you going to bring your crops in? Nobody's going to do you a favor because you're rich. So maybe you help them bring their crops in if they had a problem. And so reciprocity, maybe you trust them because your kids are in the same choral society, you go to the same church. So that's the networks of trust. So it would be an economic hardship, to get back to your question, to not bring your crops in. But you may not have the economic means, the economic capital, to hire someone to do it. So you use your social capital, your networks of trust, and norms of reciprocity to get people to help you do that.
That's the whole concept of social network sites, especially in particular Facebook, and there's been a lot of debate about whether or not Twitter can actually make money because of all the money that's being sunk into Twitter. That it starts off really small, and then it mushrooms, and people don't pay for Facebook, they don't pay for Twitter, and they build all these networks, that's all social capital, and when people contribute and make friends and everything. And then what happens is these big companies, they see, okay, well, we can make money from this. Because when they started, it was just college students, so they weren't making any money off of it. But when the companies see that they have this big, huge base of people, then they're like, okay, we can advertise to these people. So it absolutely can equate to money. And I suspect that...
So the two systems can coexist.
Absolutely, absolutely, because then they get this huge client base or these huge groups of people, and then now it's so advertised every time you type up a search. Now advertisements on the side are popping up according to what you're searching for. So they're utilizing not only Facebook's social capital, but everybody in there that's friends. And then I don't know if you had the class read The Weaker Ties, about the strong ties and the weak ties, and that's another thing. We're using that as well because not necessarily direct friends, but their friends have friends that know people, and you can get jobs through there. So that's another way that it can equate to money.
I wanted to follow up on your example, because in your example, you're giving an example of a way in which social capital generated on Facebook can be converted to economic capital by these major companies that are sort of outside of Facebook through the advertising. I want to throw out the question to you guys. Can the social capital that we might get from participating in Facebook, can we convert that ourselves to some sort of economic gain or other sort of tangible gain that exists outside of Facebook? And I'll go to you, John.
Well, I don't know on Facebook, but I know on YouTube they introduced after a while the YouTube Partners program, where people who get a lot of views get like a cent for every view. But when you're getting like millions of views, that adds up to money. And so the people who are able to use their social networking to get people to look at their videos over and over and get their friends to watch their videos and email them out are able to make money just out of the ability to convince people to watch their videos. So they're able to turn their social capital in these networks into economic capital.
So the original idea for Twitter came from the idea that it was inspired by the away messages in instant message applications like AIM. So you could look at what someone set as their away message, that Joe was out to coffee, Sheila was running late, or Bob was too busy to chat. And my friend Jack brought the idea up to me. What if you just looked at those? That's kind of interesting. I'm looking at a group of people, 12 people right now, and I kind of know what they're all up to. Isn't that weirdly interesting? And is there something there? If we just took just that out, would we have something compelling? And we started talking about it, And we started thinking, well, you're tied to your computer when you're doing that stuff. It's an IM client, so you're either not there or you're doing something computery. So what if we could get and set those messages over mobile texting through SMS? And this was in 2006, and what had happened, I believe, around then in the United States was you could start sending text messages from carrier to carrier, whereas before you had to be on Verizon if you wanted to send a message to another Verizon customer. So when we started thinking about it in this way, then it became really compelling, because now we thought, forget about the computer. Now, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. You can sort of report in, and likewise, you can have a sense of what people that you care about are up to right now. And we still had a question about whether or not that was going to be a compelling form of communication for people. We thought maybe it was too conceptual. Jack had a long history in dispatch. He wrote dispatch software for taxis and ambulances and things. So that's where sort of his mind was this idea that you'd kind of know where everything was, or what everyone was up to. So we built a prototype in 2 weeks. This was the original sketch, and that was the inspiration. And then we took 2 weeks to build a prototype. And today it's not really that different. The idea is that you say what you're doing on the web up at the top, and then you have this kind of curated timeline of sources of information that are compelling to you, whether it's friends, whether it's organizations, businesses, whatever it is. You build this, you curate it, and then you follow it. So that's pretty much where we're at today. It's not too different from the original concept, although it's changing a lot. So the initial use cases we anticipated were just rudimentary social networky type stuff, like that you would just use it among friends. And in fact, some of the early stuff that really worked for us, I think during the prototyping stage, I had just gotten a house in Berkeley here, and I was ripping up all this carpeting. It was a hot summer day, and it was gross work. It was discovering things I didn't want to see under that carpet from the previous tenants. And I was so sweating, and my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I took it out, and it was Ev, and he said, enjoying some Pinot in Sonoma after a massage. And I was like, Williams! But it was also, at the same time, I giggled because I was thinking to myself, it's weird that I know that. I wouldn't have learned that until Monday when we went back to the office, and if I happened to ask him what he did that weekend. But the fact that I was doing this and he was doing that was interesting to me. And that was one of the first weekends we had it after we built it. It took the 2 weeks to build it in. We heard similar stories from other employees who we had shared it with, they had these kind of similar moments. So that's what we anticipated. It was more of a social thing. And then we anticipated people using it for spontaneous maybe meetups or something like that, which definitely happened. And so one of the first times it really broke out was at this South by Southwest Interactive Festival in Austin, Texas, that they do every year before the music part of the festival. And that's actually what this photo is from. So somebody wrote this on a bathroom wall or something like that, just as a joke. But what we noticed there was it began to open our eyes a little bit more, because that's when we began to realize we'd invented a new form of communication that people didn't have. When this one guy told us a story about how he was at a pub, and it was loud, and there was a lot of music, and he really wanted to go somewhere more quiet where he could talk with folks, because South by Southwest is a real networky kind of conference. And so he sent out a Twitter message that said, I'm leaving this pub because it's too loud, and I'm going to go over to this other one, and he named it. And in the 10 minutes it took him to walk over there, the pub had completely filled up. It was completely packed. There was a line. It was everything, whereas it was empty before. So the idea completely backfired on him. But what was amazing about it was, wow, he motivated that many people in that short amount of time to show up there. And we realized, wow, okay, so this guy's got 100 people following him. We had a lot of sort of early adopter geeks on at that point, and that's the type of crowd at South by Southwest. So let's say it's 100 followers, 25 of those people are also at South by Southwest. If those 25 people get the message and say, hey, everyone, to their followers, this is what we're doing next, they each have sets of followers who then do that again. And sort of 3 times out, you're talking 1,000 people that get this message and head over there. So that's when it occurred to me, I think of one of the metaphors I like to think about there is that of a flock of birds moving around an object in flight. And it looks so choreographed, and it looks so sort of beautiful and perfect, like they must have practiced that every day at that spot, at that time. When in reality, this flocking behavior just comes from a very rudimentary communication among individuals in real time. And that's what enables them to do this. And that's what was enabling these people to do that. And we realized there isn't another tool for that right now. There isn't another way for people to move as one in real time like that, especially across multiple devices, mobile phones, the web. It's all working. This one short message of 140 characters can be read in its entirety across these devices, and on the simplest of tools. So that's when we were thinking, wow, there's something else here. And then that wasn't the first clue. We started hearing about, global, different stories from around the world, and one of them came right here from a Berkeley student. You guys might have heard about this already, but I'll go over it anyways because there's a couple of bits of information in there that I learned when I talked to James and hadn't heard about. So James Buck was a photojournalism student here, and he went to, the way he told us the story is he went to Egypt to photograph protests, and he kept missing the protests. He kept showing up at the right place, but it was already disbanded. He already missed it. And so he asked his Egyptian friends, how is it that you guys are sort of organizing this and knowing where to go and knowing, what time to be there and everything all so quickly and easily and simply and ahead of the authorities? And they said, we use this great thing. It's called Twitter. It's free. And that was funny to us because we're like, he's in Egypt and he finds out about this thing. I mean, why didn't he find out about it here? Because it was already like catching on in sort of the Bay Area as a thing. But anyways, he finds out about it in Egypt, and he gets on it, and he gets some people following him back here and in Egypt. And sure enough, he's totally plugged into what's happening, and he shows up at the next protest. He's getting these great photos, but then he gets arrested at the protest, thrown in the back of a car, and he does what a lot of us actually tend to do when we have Twitter, and that's he thinks, they haven't taken my phone yet. I'm going to Twitter this. So he sends out one message, and the message is just arrested. It's one word. And that gets, that goes to folks back home who are following him and know what he's up to over there. So that's meaningful to them, and they act on that. They contact, I think, the dean. The dean contacts a lawyer. Lawyer contacts the embassy, and they get him out of jail. And he sends another one-word message, freed. And it's a couple hours, and we heard about that, and we were just like, wow, people isolate the content of a single tweet, especially critics will say, come on, what is this? Look at this. I'm like, it's one word, and it means everything, So you can critique it, or you can call out items like this. I don't think it's right to critique one tweet anyway, so you have to think about the entire service. But, that's when we realized that Twitter really does deliver, really does can have this profound impact. But that wasn't everything. Early on, we realized that even in the prototyping stage here in the Bay Area, whenever there was an earthquake, we realized we didn't really think twice about it. We just immediately grabbed our phone and started to Twitter what book was falling off the shelf, what was the cat doing, whatever. And it was part of it was because we wanted to I think instinctively we wanted to check in with everybody who cares about us and who may be following us on Twitter, and kind of just express ourselves a little bit because we're all freaked out. Especially me. I mean, I'm from Boston, so the first time we moved to Berkeley, so I was on the BART about to go into the Bay, and I heard some people on the BART saying earthquake? What? Earthquake? Huh? Earthquake? And I was like, what are you guys talking about? An earthquake? So an earthquake? I started to get freaked out. I'm not going to go into the Bay. I'm going to jump off this BART, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. And it buzzed again and buzzed 3 times before I could get it out. And it was my friend saying, oh, come on, it was a 4 on the Hayward. What are we worried about? And they were kind of joking about it like it was nothing. And I was like, oh, I guess it's not a big deal. And so I just stayed on the BART. And it was great because I was home on time, and it would have been a whole thing. I would have missed my train and everything. And my wife would have been like, you got to stop freaking out. You're going to have to take that BART a lot. Anyways, and then there was another earthquake story that I'm fond of telling because it points to a whole other area that I think we're just even getting into now that's fascinating to me, and that's there was an earthquake last summer in Los Angeles, and it struck at 11:42 a.m. And also at 11:42 a.m., people began Twittering just immediately during the earthquake. Practically, they were saying, what was happening on their way to school, on their way to work, at school. One woman was at her OBGYN, and that post is really funny. I won't repeat it, but. It was hilarious, and she became famous overnight because of what she said. But the point was, Twitter people on the ground experiencing the event were immediately Twittering about it, and I noticed 9 minutes later, the AP put out a wire, basically confirming that there had been an earthquake. And I got curious, so I counted the words in the wire. There were 57 words in the wire. And I asked my guys to look up in the database how many tweets did we have in the 9 minutes after the quake with the word quake in them, and it was over 3,600. And so even at 15 words per tweet, which is conservative, we had collected a book's worth, 50,000 words worth of first-hand experiences about the earthquake in the 9 minutes it took the AP to confirm it. And that's when it occurred to me that we have this 175-year-old, industry of the wire. It's been around for a long time, and now, minutes aren't fast enough. We've changed the pace of this to real time, and there, I think there's a huge compliment there. I'm not saying everyone should just turn off CNN and just look at tweets, but there's this, we have a feed of what everyone around the world is seeing all around them every second of every day, 24/7, and they're sending it in over and over and over again. The other day I used Twitter search and I typed in accident, and I just saw all of these things posted within seconds ago of accidents people were seeing all around the world. And I was like, wow, if you took this feed and you added it to the wire, what else could you accomplish, and there's a lot there. Anyways, I won't go too much into that, but I'd love to talk more about that. Other images here represent the wildfires that were raging also last summer in Southern California. The Los Angeles Fire Department is on Twitter, and a lot of people were using Twitter just to report where they were seeing fires, and then people are creating all these great sort of Google Maps mashups combined with Twitter, pinpointing where the fires were moving so they could have an idea, an overview of like where are these fires moving, because it's so difficult to track these things. And then of course the Mumbai attacks last November, we sort of algorithmically analyze every tweet that comes in real time, and we create trends. We find the words that are being used sort of more often in the last minute, and we surface them on Twitter search. And so that was, I think some of the trends were like Thanksgiving, Turkey, and suddenly I saw Mumbai show up, and I clicked on it, and I just saw all this craziness. People were at the hotel, at the Taj Hotel, twittering from the hotel during the event. So one of the things that really stood out from all this stuff, and somebody asked me, what do you hope that people will say about Twitter in 10 years? And I was thinking about these things when I came up with this sentence, which Twitter is not about the triumph of technology, it's about the triumph of humanity. It's about what people are doing in the aftermath of these events and in the way that they're communicating. And certainly there's innovation and there's technology that goes into Twitter, but that's ultimately not what it's about. It's about humanity. So then some other use cases which I thought were really interesting and cool were a lot more, it started to jump way out of just social and just people, and it was getting into organizations and businesses and everything. And one great example was the NASA Mars Phoenix lander account. I don't know who saw that, but it was really interesting to me because we've now changed the way NASA does communications without, completely by mistake. The director of communications at NASA is named Veronica McGregor, and traditionally at JPL and NASA, what they do is they get science, they vet it. Once it's vetted, they send it to PR. PR will do maybe a press release, and then they'll send out this science news to the American public via press release. And it takes a while, and it's not always that interesting. And their job, though, is to engage the U.S. citizens. We want to be excited about this. We're paying for it. We need to know about it. And these are unmanned missions, so they're not as sexy as sending people into space and on planets and all this. So Veronica said to her boss, hey, this little guy is going to land like on a holiday morning or something, I forget. And she said, how about for the hardcore geeks, we set up a Twitter account and they can follow over SMS every key instance, like as if the landing gear doesn't go out just right, or the parachute or the thrusters, this thing's toast, it's totally going to explode, and that's going to be that after all this work. So every little action is huge. So she decided she would set up a Twitter account, and she would, as soon as she was sitting there, the second that they got word, 15-minute delay from Mars, that like the parachute had deployed, she would immediately Twitter, my parachute is deployed. And she had decided to Twitter in the first person as this little guy. And this was at the same time Pixar was really pushing Wall-E. And it was like perfect. She actually did it by mistake. She did it because she thought it was the most creative way to use less characters because of the limit of 140 characters. She thought this is an easier way to get right to the news, and she was afraid actually that it was too cute and that people were going to be like, come on, NASA, what are you doing? So she did it like that anyways, and it was awesome. And the New York Times ran this story about how genius it was. And the next morning she woke up after the initial landing, and there was 40,000 people following the account. And we had lunch with her, and she told us, the first thing I thought was, there goes my summer. I'm going to have to update this thing constantly now. And she did, and it was amazing. And what was crazy about it was, first of all, I don't know if you guys followed this, but this thing landed on Mars. First thing it did was it took a picture of its own landing gear to make sure everything was cool, and it realized it had landed on a giant block of ice. And they were like, the scientists they're kind of lame. They called the block of ice "Holy Cow." That's the name of it, because that's kind of like what they were saying. But I doubt they said "Holy Cow." But that was amazing because they were like, oh my God, we just landed on the thing we're trying to test for. All right, get in there. And so we were finding out the science within 15 minutes of it coming in from the device. And we learned on Twitter that, water was confirmed on Mars. It was really exciting. And the other thing that was interesting was, a reporter called me about this, and he said, this reminds me of another massively shared event, of the moon landing, of people gathering outside television stores, looking at the screens in the window, just sort of captivated. And that was a shared event, a shared moment that everyone was looking at together. And that's something that we found that Twitter really enables, is these shared events. When something's happening right now in real time, like a South by Southwest or like a Mumbai, suddenly, or even a TV show or something, suddenly people are sort of, the activity flurries. It really gets going. And anyways, I just thought that Veronica's use of this was just exemplary. And then when businesses would call me and ask me what's a good way to use Twitter, because she was also jumping in there and answering questions people had, still keeping the voice of the anthropomorphized little guy out there in space the whole time. And it was just amazing. And now NASA has a Twitter account for every mission critical project that they're doing, and they've really transformed the way that they're doing this. Another thing that was great for us, and it's meaningful for us from a company perspective and from a sustainability perspective, is that all these companies started jumping on Twitter, and we were really surprised at how intelligently they began to do it. We didn't think this was going to happen like this. The sort of primary example is of Comcast. I haven't talked much about search, but I'd love to talk about it, at least in the QA. Search on Twitter is different from normal web search because people around the world are twittering what's happening, what they're doing right now. And we index everything instantly. So everything's indexed in a fraction of a second. It's not like you have to wait and crunch through and crawl through this stuff. As soon as it comes in, it's indexed and it can be delivered immediately to you. So companies can go on here and they can say, okay, Comcast. And they just wait for someone to mention Comcast. And the second they do, they can reply to them or whatever they want to do. So Comcast got on here early, and there was a popular blogger who also happened to use Twitter, and he complained about Comcast on Twitter, and he said, tomorrow I'm going to write a blog post about how horrible Comcast is. I'm going to totally slay them. It's going to be the #1 Google search result for years to come. I hate Comcast. And Comcast saw that on Twitter search, and they immediately @replied him within a minute. And they said, what seems to be the problem? Maybe we should send a van out to your house. And within 40 minutes, they had this white van outside his house fixing his cable. And he was just like, the long post the next day was, Comcast customer service is amazing. And it was completely flipped it around. And then all these other companies saw that, why aren't we doing that? And they all got on there. And so they all realized right off the bat, earlier than we would have expected, that it's a conversation, and they can participate in it, and that any interaction with a customer, even if they're complaining, is an opportunity for marketing. Right, so the question is Twitter changing the way that we make decisions and act, sort of in everyday life? And I think yes. I wouldn't know if I don't think I would associate it all with Twitter, but I do think that one thing that Twitter's done has changed the pace of things like businesses and democracy to real time. I mean, the fact that members of the House and Congress are twittering while they're being addressed by Obama about their thoughts, even arguing with each other over Twitter in this closed-door session, so that by the time the doors open, the stories are already written over, out there. This particular case you're talking about, that's an interesting thing to think about. I mean, I think that the broader answer there is that people are realizing that there is a lot of value in making our communication open, and because it does something that, like, I like to think about as like social alchemy. Like if I am in Logan Airport and I say I'm at Logan Airport drinking a beer, and I Twitter that, you could argue that update is fairly valueless. But if someone gets it in real time and they're also in Logan Airport and they come find me and we sit down, we have a beer, we have an idea for a company and it becomes hugely successful, I'd argue that lead turned into gold, you know, and it was worthwhile. And that's sort of a crazy example. I mean, it could just be that I say I like tennis and someone says, me too, let's play, or whatever. But I don't know, I think something else was going on with that particular guy. He seemed, I read those, and he just seemed struck inactive. Like he didn't know what to do. And I don't know if it was because he had Twitter to do it or what. Like, if he didn't have his mobile phone, maybe he would have just been deliberating on his own in his room, pacing back and forth, what am I going to do about this guy? You know what I mean? Or maybe he was a call for help, like, and someone on Twitter should have said, dude, like, get the guy out of your bathroom. What are you doing? Like, maybe they did. So I don't know how to address that particular situation. But in general, I'd say that people are realizing open is valuable and that there are anomalies there and that there are some times when open isn't. Like recently, somebody lost a job, I heard this morning, because they got a job offer and then they sent out a Twitter that says, I got this job offer, now I just have to think about, you know, the fat paycheck versus hating my work. And then somebody else at the company was like, hey, we are on the internet too. And who was the hiring manager? Because I'm sure he'd love to know that you hate your work. And they didn't get hired. Like, they changed their mind. Of course they did. The guy just said, I just got this job and I'm probably going to hate it. So there's value to it, and you know, then there's mistakes. But again, I think like there are we're iterating and evolving the way that we communicate, and there's going to be these like favorable mutations that jump us way forward, which I think Twitter is one. And then there are going to be these little like bad little eddies that didn't quite work out too good, and we shouldn't have done them.
How do you make money?
Well, right now we don't make money. We spend a lot of money, but we have a lot of money in the bank. It's one of these kind of new internet business approaches where we want to build value now. We don't want to build revenue now. We want to build value, because we think that a large, really valuable network that people use every day and companies use every day and they're dependent on, that's a valuable thing, and we will be able to build revenue on top of that. We're 30 employees now, but for the longest time we were 10. And we could not justify saying, okay, of these 10 guys, half of you guys stop engineering and stop designing product, figure out how we're going to make money right now. And now we are down to 5 guys trying to build Twitter and grow it. It was ludicrous. We had to keep up with the growth. We had to grow the network. Now we're at the point where we're 30 and we're growing fast, and we hadn't planned initially to start showing revenue until 2010. But we kind of changed our mind, and we thought, that was in 2007, and everything changed. And now we want to, be a little bit more responsible and show some progress. We don't need to hit a home run, and our investors are super patient. They get it. They know what we need to do. But I think it's kind of it's like a mom wanting to know that you're eating. Are you good? Are you eating enough? People want to see us making a little bit of money, so that we can say, hey, we're going to be here for a long time. We're a sustainable, profitable company that you can build on. I'm convinced that there are great, sort of brilliant developers out there kind of waiting to build the next big thing on Twitter until we can show them and prove to them that we'll be here for a while. And until we start making revenue and becomes sustainable, I don't think they can completely trust that. So we'll start doing that in 2009. We've already hired a few people to start focusing on that and thinking about that. And that'll be this year.
So do you think this has anything to do with the conversation we were having about the social capital convert to economic capital? I'll tell you, I can't tell you exactly how much, but Twitter went away unless I paid for it. I would pay for it. The social capital for me is worth money. I don't know whether I would have done that the first day or
Right.
week or
Yeah.
month that I participated, but at this point, there's a network that's very valuable to me. I wonder, I bet you that's true for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, we wouldn't, whatever we do in that regard, actually, there's been tons of speculation there, and it's great because people are always coming up with these great ideas, and who knows, maybe we'll do one of them. Whatever we offer in terms of a paid service isn't going to be to suddenly say, hey, you now have to pay for this, or we're going to turn it off. It's going to be, where are we delivering value, and where could we add more value by adding something that you might want to pay for. So everything will remain free for everyone, even if they're using it for commercial purposes. But we can ask people, and we can look at the patterns and see how people are using Twitter and say, okay, we're going to add these things for these purposes, and you can pay for them if you want them, and get even more value out of it. So if you're the pie company and you've increased your bottom line by 20% on Twitter, and you can give us $20 a month, and you can increase that even more, then of course you're going to want to do that. You know, it's totally worth it for you. So that's stuff that we want to look into over the course of this year, and hopefully just provide even more value to people.
I think it's, to me, it's a really important signal that I know people who love Twitter. I love Twitter. I know people who hate Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
There are probably people in this room who hate Twitter. That the olden days of 1985, when the well was running on modem banks and was running on a VAX, and just even with 1,200 baud modems, if you had 50 or 60 people online at one time, it would slow the computer to a crawl. Literally, you would log in and go get a cup of coffee while you're waiting for your first prompt to appear.
Right.
The customers organized ourselves to pitch in to pay a year or 2 years in advance so they could go out and buy a computer. Have you ever heard of customers capitalizing a company voluntarily without being asked? To us, that was a real watershed.
Yeah.
I don't know, it seems, I get the same feeling with Twitter, that people they're attached to it in some emotional way.
And that's, I think, why they want to see it making money too, because they want to know that we're okay. Right?
Yes.
You know?
Well,
Don't live on your credit cards.
when Twitter wasn't doing so well technically.
Oh yeah.
What other service would people just continue?
Well, the only other
to
thing.
hang on when-
Oh, that was wild. The community that formed around the fail whale, and that they called it the fail whale and all that stuff, was at once disturbing, but also so encouraging, because it meant that like they're sticking with us, and they're kind of making lemonade out of lemons, and so that was awesome. I don't know if everyone knows what I'm talking about, but we picked I'll just dig in a little bit here because it was kind of funny. But we early on when we were working on Twitter, I was looking at these funny cat site, like these LOL cat sites, and I was laughing because I think they're funny. And Jack was like, "What are you doing? Like, we're all working really hard, and you're laughing at these cat sites." I'm like, "Look at this cat inside the computer. It's so funny." And look, it says, "I am in your computers fixing things." And he was like, I don't think it's funny. Our site's down. And he's like, how about you design an error page for the site? And I was like, error page, funny cats. And so I took this funny cat that was in the computer with his screwdriver, and I made that the error page. And then that was kind of funny. People saw it and thought it was hilarious. But then we started going down so much, and that the cat was the cat that I made a few different cats, and people were like, "This isn't very funny. Like, I'm trying to use this thing and it's constantly breaking." So I tried to find a different image that was a little bit more still fun but much more uplifting, and it was of this big whale and all these little birds working together to lift the whale. And I was like, "We're working on it. It's a big job. We're all working on it," and that became known as the fail whale. And people got tattoos of it and made fail whale pale ale, and there was a fail whale fan club. And then I heard a guy was giving the keynote speech at like the fail whale like conference, and I was like, "What?" And now the fail whale is like in retirement. So anyway, I saw a question over here. I think Shaq is amazing. Like I didn't know much about, I don't know much about Shaq or basketball, and then I saw that he was on Twitter and I started following him, and I learned that he's this wonderful man. Like he's at the soup kitchen every other weekend. He's like he's a policeman. He got like passed his like policeman's exam. He wants to be a policeman when he's done in the NBA. And he does these amazing things for his fan. Like one of the first things he did was he he saw that there was somebody pretending to be Shaq on Twitter, so he made himself the real Shaq, and he was like, I could be better Shaq than this guy. He was like, this guy's actually a pretty good Shaq, but I'm better, and so he started to out Shaq, the fake Shaq, and then people were like, I don't believe this is really you, and he's like, give me a phone number, and they would give him his phone number, and he called him up like, what's up, this is Shaq, you didn't believe me. And now he does stuff like he's you've probably seen it. He says, I'm at this diner at this location, come by and say hello. And he's like, first person to come touch me gets tickets to my next game. And then people like just come out of the woodwork in the mall like, we're on Twitter too. And so that's amazing. He invited a bunch of us from Twitter to a game in Oakland the other night. We went, and Carolyn, who does support for Twitter, she's this tall. And she went and met him, and he met her, and he sent out a tweet like, should I kiss the Twitter representative? And everyone was like, yeah, do it. And so he gave her like a big kiss. And she was like, oh my God, Shaq just kissed me. And she gave him the largest T-shirt we had, and he was like, oh, this is interesting. But I think he's one of my favorite. I mean, I have to say that Demi and Ashton are also my favorite just because they seem to be. It's like they work for us. I mean, it's amazing. We heard through one of Ashton's people that Demi and Madonna throw an Oscar party every year. And at this year's Oscar party, they had a laptop set up in the front room. And as their A-list, Hollywood celebrity friends came in, they're like, come here, you got to sign up for a Twitter account. Let's do this thing. And they got them all on Twitter. And we were like, oh my God, how much would that cost somebody if they had to pay for it? You can't even arrange for that. So. But I guess I'd have to say I think Lance Armstrong's pretty good too. The other day he posted an update that said it was just at D at 085, and I was like, what kind of whacked out crazy code is this? And then a couple of minutes later, sorry about the booty tweet, everyone. Apparently he just had his BlackBerry in his pocket, and it was sitting on it.